Hey, welcome to Jack Theology. Good to be here. Um,
Here we are again, finally back, better than ever. I don't know about that, but we are back.
yeah, better than ever. We needed a couple weeks to digest life and
you think a couple of weeks is going to do it?
oh man.
A couple of years, a couple of
Well,
decades. I don't. A couple of centuries. How long is it going to take?
I don't know, man. This is I needed at least a week that first week off, and then that was a tough week. Um, yeah, lots happened though, because we haven't. I mean, looking forward to the post show. We could
Yeah, it's been a few weeks. I think November 1st or very beginning of November. November 2nd was when we last were here.
Yeah, yeah, the lot to get to, especially at the post show with our your
Yeah, with both of our
activities on the
competitions. So yeah, it should be a good. It should
yeah.
be a good episode.
So yeah, let's get to it. The election happened, and we wanted to talk a little bit about kind of just our reflections and where do we go from here as the church, as the body of Christ, theological. I must say, I think one of the reasons why we felt compelled to start this podcast a couple of years ago was to address Jack theology that had led to some of the cultural things that we find ourselves in now. And I think, everything's theological. And so a lot of the reason why Trump is in place now is because of theology. And we would consider a lot of that theology jacked. I had thought, and I'll be honest, and maybe it's just the naivete in me, the I believe the best in others. I had thought the church had grown past Trump by and large. I had thought that, um, his numbers went down in 2020 from 2016 amongst the church, and so I thought that trend would continue. And so for me, the most disappointing thing I saw, I was gutted, was just to see the actual growth. I mean, from 2016, I mean, Trump had more of the Christian vote across all different races and tribes than he had in 2016, even. So
Yeah,
he grew.
I think it was a sad wake up call to me, a real reminder. I think of what first of the church that I grew up in and the church context that I grew up in, and what kind of pushed me out of a lot of those church contexts was what people say and what people do. You know, how people pretend to live and then how people really live. Just kind of the disconnect, between what they project and who they actually are, which I think is a lot of what you're saying. In that disappointment, as you thought people were different than they ended up being.
Yeah. And I think some folks said they were different, and I got to believe that majority of them didn't follow through on what they said. Um,
Yeah, there's this
so
propensity to hide your vote for Trump, right? And I'm not buying the it's because nobody's going to approve of me voting for Trump. It's shame. It's guilt. It's the spirit. It's that you understand that he represents nothing that you teach your children is important, that you say is important when it comes to character. And so I think the polls are always off on Trump because everybody lies because of shame and guilt. They're not telling the truth.
yeah, spot on. Um, People don't want to be associated with Trump, but they sure do vote for him. And
Because, yeah,
honestly, after he won, a lot of them came out of the woodworks and admitted what they really thought. And
because
so,
there's security in numbers, right? Give us Barabbas.
mhm.
Everybody's shouting, give us Barabbas. If everybody is saying it, then it must be right.
Yeah, that's a good theological point. Uh, the church asked for Barabbas, and they got Barabbas. It's such a great direct parallel, and I think, yeah, we did not choose Jesus as a church, and so to say that because you want your grocery bill to go down, which I didn't want to make this a policy episode, but Come on, people! Like Trump is not going to help your grocery bill go down.
Has no effect on
And
gas. Has
even
no effect on eggs.
uh,
Maybe if you I don't know though with tariffs and on the world stage, the fear across the world of stuff, imports. Maybe it will have an effect, but it's going to have a negative effect.
yeah, yeah. Everything I read and have studied on tariffs is it's not going to do what people think it's going to do. It's going to do the opposite, but it'll actually help out Trump's rich cronies. Is what it actually will help out. Which, if you haven't figured it out by now, Trump
Doesn't
is
care about the little
only
guy.
out to he's only out to help himself. That's purely what this is.
Narcissism,
Uh, yeah.
sociopathic narcissism.
So yeah. So there. That I guess that was my personal kind of experience. I think you got two white cisgender straight men who a lot of outside of the wealth thing. I mean, we're gonna pay for stuff financially, but sociologically, we're gonna be fine because Trump is for us particularly, and but a lot of the folks around us, a lot of folks I know and have interacted with in the weeks. I mean, I've had more pastoral conversations in the last 2 weeks as a result, a direct result of this election. Just trying to calm fear, to comfort, to just be a listening ear for people to vent. Um, it's been a lot. It really has been heavy on me. So there's a couple groups, at least for me, that I've experienced kind of dealing with this the most. One would be the trans and queer and gay community, and then also then the undocumented community, and then those that work with the undocumented community as kind of secondary from that. Um, and it's funny listening to Trumpers as I've posted on social media about those two groups, and it's like people are like, "Oh, they'll be fine. We care about them. They'll be fine. Don't you worry. You'll see. Uh, we care about them." uh, yeah, it's so I was in one conversation with a young person, and they were just shaking uncontrollably, like just could not stop crying and shaking because of what they feel like this means for them and how they're valued in our world and society, and who can they trust, uh, who's going to value who they really are. And yes, they go by they, and it's heartbreaking to watch where I mean, even more real is that feeling of I thought people were on my side that I now know aren't, and that's very hurtful. And that was a big push for Trump and his team in this election to get elected. I mean,
Fear and anger. Yeah, and that was
yeah,
one of the topics. Anger over mistruth, anger over people. Um, he leveraged hate.
hmm.
Leveraged hate. There's nothing of Jesus in that.
Yeah. Would Jesus say they'll know me by your love for each other? And yet here we have a vote for hate, and I've seen it. I felt it after some of these conversations. I felt like Christian had become almost overnight a hate word. Like what? Like like in some of these conversations, I was wearing a collar and everything, and so there was a direct like, um, do I trust this Christian? You know, um, which is interesting. and I addressed it almost, well, with one group of people, I addressed it kind of head on. Like, I just asked them, "What are your thoughts when you hear the word Christian?" And the theme was, Christians hate us, um, which is very sad to hear. And obviously, that's not the way of Jesus. No matter what you think about theologically, uh, you know, in the sexuality area, and even the undocumented area, like if that's a sin or not, like all groups of people should view and would view Jesus as love, and they should view the church as love. They should view, yeah, Christians love me, and they don't right now. That is not what people view Christians as, which is very sad and heartbreaking. As someone who, we pour our lives into this, into the church, into developing other people to be like Christ, to be a little Christ, a Christian, and yet it feels like it's just all our work is just gone.
Yeah. I mean, I think Christians have bought into this narrative that has been sold to them by both evangelicalism as well as the Republican Party, that they're persecuted. You cannot be the persecuted religion when you are the majority religion. You you cannot be the persecuted political class whenever you are the majority political class. You're not persecuted, and even if you were, which we are not, you don't become the persecutor. And Christians have become the persecutor. And if you can't see that, then I truly question whether or not you have a relationship with Jesus Christ and whether or not you have the Spirit in you. If you can't see that the things that you're supporting and giving yourselves to are persecuting other people, and they're screaming it at us. They're telling us with their tears. They're voting with their feet. And if we can't see how these things are true and literal persecution of other people who are not doing Christianity our way, who are not living our way, I just don't know that there's any of the fruit of the Spirit. And without the fruit of the Spirit, do you have any of the Spirit?
Yeah, no, you're right on. I mean, I had a pastor tell me directly. He didn't use the word persecuted, but he told me directly his vote was for Trump because he wanted to take away rights for the gay community, because he thinks it's a sin and they don't deserve any rights until they repent. Literally, they just like bluntly told me that. And he was one of the ones that pre-election, he constantly was making it seem like he was not for Trump.
You think he does that for like the 7 deadly sins? He sees a fat person, is he taking away their right to vote? He sees, or their rights. If he sees somebody who's given to too much pride, is he working to try to take away their, like, even if you consider LGBTQ a sin, which is ridiculous, but whatever, where do you get to the point where in a place that isn't even a Christian nation, that's not run by Christian law, it's not Israel and OT times, how do you get to the point of removing rights? But even if you get to the point of removing rights on the basis of sin, why aren't you starting with the sins that the Bible actually talks about?
Yeah.
Because I'm guessing he's fat. Maybe he's not, but let's look at the things that it actually talks about as being true and legitimate sin.
Yeah, he is out of shape.
Rather than the one or two verses, at most, that may or may not have to do with sexuality and probably are completely misunderstood.
Yeah. You bring up a great point.
Where have we lost our way? We have sold our souls to empire, for power, for position, and we've been brainwashed as a religious people. That's the only thing. It's the only thing I can figure is we've literally been brainwashed, and somehow or other, up became down in Scripture, and down became up.
Yeah.
whether or
you
not
bring
you
up a
voted, whether or not you voted for Trump, this is still going on in the church. I mean, obviously, you and I see it localized there. Within the inability to see, what's going on and what you're supporting. But even without that, even without a vote for Trump, the church is still living that in the way they think about these topics. There's nothing of Jesus or Jesus perspective. And we have a lot of
no.
Jesus perspective, from the Sermon on the Mount to the miracles to the Beatitudes to all of the parables. It's just like it's maddening. I'm gonna hit
Yeah,
pause.
and you bring
Serenity
no, you
now.
bring
Go
up a great
start talking.
yeah.
Yes.
No, you bring up a great point that I wanted to make on this is somehow for some reason we've made the issue of being gay or transgender the number one sin, and to your point, it's not listed in the deadly sins. I mean, it's found in a list, debatably found in a list the apostle Paul uses, but somehow it's not it is the number one way in which churches now distinguish whether or not you're a sinner
Right. Yeah.
or
Yeah.
not.
I had
You
somebody pull
know,
out that verse today, from First Corinthians, lists homosexual in there. I'm like, you're going to want to look at some other translations of that, and then also you're going to want to look and see when that word homosexual was put in there. Homosexuality was known during the time of Jesus, and that's not the word that's in there. So somebody else challenged him. It's like, oh, it's man betting with man or something like that. I'm like, oh, so all of the army, are in violation of this sexual misconduct because men are sleeping with men. Like, you're making an assumption, even if that is what that means, about what that means, that you have no idea what that means. And you guys in the Navy, you're now going to hell because you've violated that word.
yeah, all our troops have committed that sin.
That word, arseton, whatever that word is there, yeah, that gets translated as homosexual and is not. Anyway,
No, yeah,
it's
that's
ridiculous.
yeah, it is ridiculous. And that word homosexual wasn't introduced into the scriptures until the 1950s. So it's a new phenomenon. But regardless, like to me, it's like,
It's not what we were told to care about.
yeah, like how did that become number one for you? And I've had those conversations too over the last couple of weeks of churches feeling emboldened to go even harder in that issue, and then folks who you know aren't gay, they don't have any kids that are gay, but are allies for the gay community have come to me and been like, what do I do? Like my church is doing this and I don't agree, and so Trump has emboldened these churches to which is crazy that we're getting our topics that we talk about on a Sunday morning from a politician.
Yeah, we no longer have theologies. I don't think we have politics. We have social issues, the same things, that they've been saying about progressive and liberal churches for decades now is the problem, I think, in our more conservative and evangelical churches. It's insanity.
Yeah.
But it's where we are. I mean, what do we do now? I think part of my frustration and sorrow over the last few weeks, my grieving and mourning. I mean, yeah, that I have to deal with another 4 years of Trump, which he probably won't live that long anyway. But who knows? He probably will, just to spite us all. Anyway, I probably need to EMDR that out of me. It is what it is. But how do I work and minister in a context where a majority of the evangelical and religious Christian folks here in the United States not only have no idea of what Jesus actually taught and said and meant by what he taught and said, but are 180 degrees diametrically opposed in a lot of places to those things, and as you said, are now emboldened, righteous, and feel as though they're in the majority, and the majority is always right, obviously. So I don't know where we go from here. I don't know where the church goes from here. I don't know how to minister in this context anymore.
Hmm.
And that has been a part of the grieving in the morning, I think, is as you started. I don't recognize this thing anymore called the church, and I just don't know what to do about it.
Hmm. Um, so I'm getting spiritual direction training to be a spiritual director from a old nun here in New Jersey. She's 84 and has been a spiritual director most of her ministry life and been training spiritual directors for a lot of that as well. And I took a class with her this Saturday um, on some topics related to that. And she said that we were kind of talking about this, and she said most Christians haven't actually become a Christian. Um, they haven't truly fallen in love with Jesus and allowed Jesus to fill them with His love. So they're really not a little Christ. They haven't become Christ, little Christ Christian. They do the activity, right? They do the religion. She was kind of distinguishing between religion and relationship, which we do a lot in evangelicalism too. But religion is like you go to church, you give some money, you say the prayers, you do these things, you study the Bible. In the Catholic world, you go through the sacraments and you do that thing. And the point of religion is to push you into relationship so that you become a Christian. And she said, for most people, they don't actually become Christian. And I thought that was a very profound statement. And I was thinking about a lot of this, and I think a lot of it is like there's a lot of people in evangelical in the church that do the religious stuff, but don't actually become Christian.
Hmm.
And so for me, that's kind of where I'm at. Is like, all right, I think now we know where the church is at, and we haven't done a good job of drawing people to become Christian, to draw them into Christ. And so,
So
yeah, I'm with
what
you.
what do we do? Do we try to redeem and rescue and evangelize the church that thinks they're saved or that they're Christian, or do we pivot and try to work and disciple those who are a part of the true church but aren't in the visible church? I guess maybe we've wrestled with this question for decades or centuries in Christianity. Where do we spend our time? What do we do?
Yeah,
I don't.
I don't know. I mean, I think the question you and I and others like us have to answer over the next 4 years and beyond. Um, what do we lean into? Where do we where do we push? I think over the last couple weeks, as I process, I think we're learning and we'll continue to learn where the church, religious church, actually is, and I think we've seen it. So to me, that gives me hope. Is like, okay, Jim Collins, he writes about built to last or whatever. Is give me like the brutal facts of where things are. I think we're
I
discovering
think
the brutal
I think we
facts.
might have gotten some of those right. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
we're far more knowledgeable today than we were a couple of weeks ago.
exactly. So if I see any hope in it, is all right. We know the brutal facts now. What we do with those, I think, is where the debate comes, the question comes. I think the further processing comes. I don't know the direct answer for that. My instinct is to not try to reform, is to try to just, lean into folks that are God is already drawing to Himself, and just invest in those folks. Allow God to work. But I don't know. I don't know. I feel like I've been trying to reform the church for so long that I feel discouraged. So
Yeah, I don't think that there are a lot of visible representations of the church, at least in a healthy way, in society, and so it's easy to understand why people walk away from the church, and it's also easy to understand why culture in the world looks at the church or looks at Christianity and says, not only do I not want to have anything to do with that, but it's actually counter um, to anything that is good and healthy and helpful. It's actually antagonistic. It's toxic, not just to itself and to its people, but to any world in which it chooses to place itself in, or any institution or any government. This is playing out in Oklahoma with the superintendent and Bibles. We see this playing out in so many different ways. This fusion of toxic Christianity, and yeah, of course, the world is looking at that, saying that's absolutely insane. And as a Christian, so am I. So I like the idea, I guess, of doubling down, on those people, on those things that are the true church, finding them and doubling down and trying to invest there rather than just invest in trying to stop a flood that you're not going to stop. Um, but I look around and it's hard to see and find, for me, even me, the true church. It's so disconnected and so
Mm.
underground. It's not in any of the places that I'm used to looking, sadly.
Mm. Yeah, that's a good line. It's not in the places I'm used to looking, and I'm finding could get well. A couple thoughts. Yeah, that flood, you can't stop it, and what the flood does is just it just bulldozes over you, and I've felt that too over the last couple weeks, and I know you felt that uh, as well.
I've got a message or two. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Uh, I mine have been more private. I had a email exchange with somebody, and I used your line. This is more probably an offline conversation, but no, I do not need to meet with you to reconcile. I am not. You are not safe for me right now. So I think that's a good line for some of this. It's just I need mental space from all of that, especially when you're under attack.
Yeah.
Uh,
Um, I don't always do that, but there are instances where I just say there's nothing good, there's nothing healthy, there's nothing of God in any of this, and I'm just not going to subject myself to it. Nothing good or productive will come out of this other than harm to me or anger to me, and I recognize that I'm not in a position where I am able to say anything or be helpful to you in any way. So it's a double negative. So just cancel each other out.
yeah, where I've
It's that
experienced.
verse almost, God gave them over. It's almost like,
Yeah,
you are
yeah,
on this journey. I cannot help you or prevent you from taking this journey. The only thing that can hopefully save you is a miracle invasion of the Spirit of God, which is not going to come from me. It's going to come from God, or you being like the prodigal and being in the far country and eating the toxicity crap that you're eating, and at some point just waking up because you've completely gorged so much on it that you wake up. So go ahead and keep eating. I'm not going to stop you.
yeah, that's good. I mean, yeah, you can't. That is something to take away from this is you can't really argue, convince folks that are not there. The folks that we're going to have influence over are the people asking the questions. I think our voices, what benefits, what I've been learning recently is to continue to have a strong voice publicly because it gives voice to those that don't or can't or their personality doesn't lend itself to that, and it
Yeah.
creates a space that they feel safe with you, and so they feel safe to reach out to you.
Yeah.
I think
That's a
I
good
should
word.
move on. I should move on from the illusion that those posts or thoughts or preaches sermons are going to change anybody's mind who's like, all in on MAGA. I've given up hope that that's what's going to happen. But I do want to be a voice and give safe spaces for people that are questioning that. And I think those are the people that we will have influence over and should be there for. Um,
Yeah, I think
yeah,
that's a really good point, Matt. I don't. Do I think Trump is the Antichrist? No, I don't know, but no, I don't think Revelation is
he's
that
not
kind.
intelligent enough
I
to
don't.
be the answer.
I don't think Revelation is that kind of book. But if it were that kind of book, what I do see though, and there's people taking the mark and just blindly following, and it bringing great harm to them. And I totally agree. I love what you said there. I think voices of dissent are important in order to let those people who are underground know that, first of all, they're not crazy, and then second of all, they're not alone, and hopefully that there is still some hope that God, Christ, has not given up on the redemption of humanity and the world. And so yeah, I think that that's a large part of the reason why I continue to take the hits and speak out, isn't because there's this idea that I'm going to change anybody's mind, but to let the people who can't talk or can't be public know that they're not alone. And I feel a responsibility. I feel a responsibility for that. And then I also thankfully am able to block all of those who are crazy. At least, I used to be able to on Twitter. Now
You can't block
it's
anymore.
crazy town. But Elon Musk and Twitter and the state of all of that is just another talk about election interference.
Yeah, I've curated my my Facebook a lot better now. It's a lot more stress free. So,
Yeah, well, I think that our access, where it takes us in our sanity, in our relationships, how it affects us. You and I have offline had many conversations about social media and the impact and how we should navigate it. And I think that that's something that a lot of people are thinking through, and wrestling with right now is how do we engage, and what's safe and what's not safe, and what's in balance and what's not in balance, and what are we going to give ourselves to and what are we not. And I think that those are good conversations. The interesting thing that's happening is the toxicity is chasing the health down, like a virus. it's like, people jump ship, from one social media to another social media site. And then, at first all of the idiots are like, yes, they're gone. And then they're like, oh, well, who am I going to beat up? So now I've got to go create an account over on this side just to be an ass.
yeah,
Because as a Christian, that's what I'm called to do, is, to afflict those who are in peace, to bring toxicity to places of health, to bring chaos.
You're right. It's like a disease, like a cancer.
It is. It's exactly what it is.
Yeah, it's disheartening.
What is that verse in First Peter? The evil one, Satan, prowls around like a roaring lion, thinking, seeing who's going to devour. I see a lot of toxic Christians just out in the public square and in the public forums, just looking for who they can devour.
Yeah, that's very true. And one of the crazies on Twitter said, you're not doing it right for the kingdom of God if you're not being called a misogynist, a racist, a bigot.
I question your Christianity if you're not if you're
Nazi.
not being called a Nazi, a misogynist, a patriarch.
What
Guy.
in the world? I mean, didn't Jesus tell us that they will know you by your love?
Yeah, I don't think these guys
Somewhere
read
in there.
Jesus.
No.
I really don't. I don't. Jesus is not a requirement for modern Christianity, for evangelicalism, for Christian nationalism. Jesus is not a necessity for any of these things. They don't talk about Jesus. Why don't they talk about Jesus? Because not only do they not need Jesus, Jesus is counterproductive. You'll hear him say, two or three verses, about a sword or something like that, but they're not going to read the two or three verses around it. They're not going to read all of the other verses where Jesus talks about conflict or weaponry or peace. They're not going to put anything in context. Two or three verses are helpful to them. They get really angry that Jesus doesn't have anything helpful to them on LGBT. They'll try with the divorce conversation of Matthew 19, but they don't even understand the divorce conversation of Matthew 19, so they're not usually able to leverage it for LGBT. But they just completely avoid Jesus. They don't need him, and he's counterproductive.
You're right. I've been told that by these Christian nationalists. Now they've taken the approach they don't really engage us much anymore. I've noticed, even some more of the bigger accounts too. Like our our friend New Evangelicals, he tried hard to get one of them on his show, and dude just ghosted him. Ignored him. Um, so they're not listening. So it's just more proof in the pudding that
It's not helpful to them.
yeah,
They
let's
have
not.
their group of people. They have their sycophants, and as Christianity and evangelicalism has been for a long time, it's a game of influence and power and money. So, arguing with us all the time may raise their star just a little bit, but it doesn't put food on the table. You know,
No. Yeah. So one of the things I've noticed, and even before the election, but it kind of came to me as I'm processing through this, and this could get me shot, but
okay, this ought to be good.
I tend to see Jesus more, his love displayed more in the Muslim community than I do in the Christian community. Um, the welcoming of the other, the welcoming of the stranger, like I've never felt more welcomed.
Hospitality, yeah. Same
Uh,
with me too in Muslim contexts.
it's been fascinating as I've entered into these spaces, and obviously I don't look like, I don't wear, I don't pray the way they do. I probably say things poorly, uh, you know, but I'm still welcomed into conversation, into relationship. I'm invited into spaces that I never dreamed that I would be invited into. And so it has been striking me that there is more love, there's more giving flesh to who Jesus was. And they'll even talk about Jesus and who he was. And they look to Jesus as one of their prophets,
Yeah,
and they're real about it. It is a real thing. Like they admire and want to model their lives like Jesus. And they do a way better job of it
yeah. Oh yeah. I
than
mean,
we do.
set aside the extremists, right? Set aside the
Well, our
terror. Set aside the
extremists,
terrorists. Yeah, I mean, you set those things aside, and true Muslims, like they actually practice their faith. Like it is woven into necessarily their daily lives. Like it's not just an hour on Sunday. It's somebody who's telling them what they want to hear politically. They're literally on their knees praying together multiple times a day, every day. They're required to practice their faith. Christianity, not in the same way. And we have our own extremists, which I think is what you were about to say, and
yeah,
and
yeah.
people who are like Sharia law, women in burqas, all of the, this is wrong. Why don't you just kind of step back for a moment and take a look at Christianity and where Christianity is and is heading in the U.S.? We like leapfrogged Sharia law a long time ago. Our burqas look different, right? Our Sharia law looks different, but it is no less a terror to the world and the communities in which we live. Maybe even more so.
Well, one could argue that the violence in which we inflict in the Middle East is the same as the terrorists, and I think we would
Absolutely. It's religiously motivated
speak,
violence.
we would speak against that violence from America, just as I know my Muslim friends would speak against that violence from terrorists. So I think, yeah, it. there's not much difference, and I think there is a lot. To me, there's a lot to learn from the Muslim community, and how they love, and like you just drew out as well, their commitment to their faith. I think there's something to learn there. They This is purely anecdotal, and I'm sure somebody like Samuel Perry can do some research on this, but uh, I spent some. I went to the Rutgers like orientation with young students that come in, and I sat at our interfaith table once a week during the whole summer. And the number one group that was of students that was looking for a faith group was the Muslim community. It just, I mean, easily the number one group. And so that was fascinating to me. And I would say number two was the Catholic group. Was students were right after that. And what do they have in common? They have in common high structure, high religious activity, and then and so here's what I learned about the evangelicals is the parents would come to our table and ask if their kid came by the table to get involved. And it's like, well, number one, how would I know? I mean, I just saw 1,000 kids walk by my table over the last 3 hours. How would I know if your kid stopped by? But no Catholic parent, no Muslim parent, no Jewish parent would stop and ask if their kid stopped by. It was only the evangelical parent that would ask that, which I don't know what the connection is there, but I found that fascinating as well. So I think there's something to
Do
learn
you think they
from.
were afraid they stopped there, or were they?
uh, that's funny. Well, my mom would have done that. I told my son to come by the religious table. Did he come by? It's a very evangelical, I think, parent thing to do.
Yeah, I think a lot of what the Christian nationalists, are saying is that young men are joining up to these things because they want to be a part of something that matters. And Christian
Mm.
nationalism is offering them something that matters, which I think I know very little about Islam, but I think that there is in a lot of ways, in extremists and fundamentalism in Islam, they do it the same thing. Young men who are wooed into this idea that violence, that they can have a hand in changing the world through violence, and Christianity is now offering the same thing, to young men, and a resurgence in that is not a good thing. A resurgence in that kind of mentality is not a good thing among young men, and it just instead of wooing men into this idea that they can change the world by changing other people's lives for the better, we're wooing young men into what's that Jesus is storing up treasures on earth rather than in heaven. You can become somebody who can change the world by amassing more guns, by becoming powerful, over other people, by controlling, the ethnicities that you have to interact with. It just, we're lying to them about their faith and what the nuts and bolts of their faith are. And we've got to give them a better story. We've got to give ourselves and the world a better story, but we don't want that story because that story pushes against our biases. It pushes against our racism and our bigotry. And I'm sorry, Joel Webben, you being called a bigot is not something that you should be proud of.
No, not at all. I think, yeah, no Christian
Jesus wasn't called a bigot. He was.
never. He was killed because he loved the wrong people. Was a big reason why, right? The
Yeah.
people in the margins of society, the unclean, and yeah, and it's just the opposite with those guys. They're going after the people in the margins and those that want to love the people in the margins. They would have killed Jesus, which essentially you kind of hinted at that. They don't want to talk about Jesus. Essentially, they are killing Jesus again by just ignoring him and who he was. So, which isn't surprising, shouldn't surprise us. But yeah, I guess the thing I draw out of it, my learning, I think those are great learnings. The call to something deeper to change the world. I think too is like I think we can call people to more. Like it's similar, but I think we can call young people to commit further, deeper into their faith, to lean into liturgy, the stuff you talked about in your book, shameless plug by Kevin's book. You know, like that stuff. I think is the way that we should go in this culture with Christianity, and lean into that. And I think evangelicals are afraid of it. I mean, they're afraid of it from a religious sense. They're not afraid of it when it comes to like their politics and how they vote and and all of that, of course. So, yeah. Anyways, we'll keep processing this.
I'm sure we'll
Keep
talk about it a lot the next few years.
Yeah, there'll be plenty of topics. I mean, we didn't even get into the crazy cabinet nominations. Have you been nominated for the cabinet yet? I mean,
I think I'm too qualified.
you,
my
you
rap sheet isn't long enough.
Yeah. Well, I was gonna say you have a fun Twitter account. He might enjoy your Twitter account and just put you in charge of social media for the for the country.
it's it's going to be a wild ride. I just love the people who, no matter what he does, it's the perfect, the bestest, nothing could be better than that. Like, it's fun to watch people just completely sell their soul, and listen to them say things, just emperor has no clothes, things that are completely and utterly idiotic and insane, just complete insanity. Like, if it happened on the other side, people would be losing their ever-loving minds. Like, but just because Trump did it, it's like, this shit smells good. Like, you're shining a turd. And it's fun sometimes, though it affects a lot of people, but it's really fun sometimes just to watch people defend the Matt Gaetz nomination as though he's the second coming of Jesus Christ. It's like, I mean, just
we elected a felon for sex abuser.
A sex abuser for president. So what do we? Yeah. What do we expect? It's a circus, and the world is laughing at the monkeys. The show. It's just
they are laughing at us. I mean, the Parliament, the Scottish Parliament, like I don't know if you probably saw that clip of that guy just like laying into Americans, and we deserved every bit of it. We deserved
every bit of it and more.
Yeah. Yeah. So go to the after show.
All right, let's do it. So it's a part of the show where Matt and I talk a little bit about fitness and what's been going on. And I know that both of us, right after the day after, I think or 2 days for you, 1 day for me after our last show aired, both you and I had a competition. And I know you were like on again, off again, whether or not you were going to do it. There was the injury you were working through. Were you still going to do it? There was alcohol involved that you really wanted. So what happened? Fill me in.
Yeah. So I was injured and I was feeling better that week, but I hadn't been able to run.
It was what, a 5K? Is that what it was?
I did a 5K. Yeah. And it was all on trails. It was like off road. And I was like really debating it. I had kept my cardio up at the CrossFit gym doing the ski erg because I didn't have to move my legs. So I just went out there and did what I could. And I felt pretty good for the first half, for the first like mile and a half. And then I think just leg fatigue and my own just anxiety. I kind of did a walk, run, shuffle the rest of the way.
I understand the walk, run, shuffle.
Yeah. And it felt all right. I was I was pretty sore. because I think just because I hadn't been using my legs, I think that was really it. The injury part of it, I was fine. So that I was really thankful, and I was very happy with myself. I was very happy with my result, even though I didn't. I knew I could have gone faster, but I was very happy with the result and where I was at. So, um, yeah, looking forward to doing another one now that they can get back on the training grind. I really would like to do one of those high rocks.
Yeah,
Uh, I'm hoping that one comes in our area that I can sign up for. I think that's my hope. If I can't do a high rocks, I'll do some kind of maybe Spartan run or something like that in the spring, to train for, to kind of utilize my CrossFit side of me. But my lifts have been going up, which is crazy to think about. I guess because I don't know. I don't know what. Maybe I'm just full of testosterone, Kevin. I don't know.
that's the only
That
explanation.
Yeah, I don't know. Uh, but it's been fun. So I PR'd my bench. I've been PR'd my shoulder lifts.
It's crazy. I
Um,
feel like those things
yeah,
always have come at random times, like the most inopportune and oddest times.
yeah,
You'll start hitting PRs and feeling strong. It's like I have no connection. Like, what's causing this? So that doesn't
yeah,
surprise me that it would be random.
yeah. And so
Of course, it
yeah,
could
that's
just be
been
you're at a second puberty and all that testosterone
yeah,
is
yeah,
surging as well, or third puberty, or
yeah. I don't know, but that's been encouraging despite the injury. So yeah, that's where I'm at. You took home some hardware.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I wasn't expecting to place at all. I also wasn't expecting there to be any competition. And my coach was like, "That's like the hardest competition that we've ever seen there," which is amazing. Yeah, but I four third places in four
Nice.
categories. So at
Those
least
are good.
at least I'm consistent. Those things they're heavy too.
Oh wow,
They're real metal.
that's
Um,
awesome.
so yeah, did that. It was weird. It was like by the time I got to the competition, it was like I didn't even want to like go out on the stage. It's like I've already done everything really that I set out to do. And it's just so weird to go out and just have people judge you on the way that you look. Like it's just
Yeah.
you know insanity. But it was fun, and the fascinating the community. It was just such a breath of fresh air. And you and I have talked about this kind of regularly when it comes to fitness communities as well as other communities outside the church. It's like this is what I've been longing for, in religious spaces and in Christian spaces, and it's just so hard to find because in the Christian world it's competitive. Who's the better Christian, who believes better, who's acting and living better. It's also competitive, obviously, in the fitness world. Like you're there with people who you're competing quite literally against.
Mm.
In the Christian world, it's all fake competition, but in the fitness world, it's all real competition. But these people are kind and nice to each other and helpful, and it reminded me, I think, of how far the church, how much the church has lost in what true
Mm.
community is, and finished that finished being on stage and walked out, and they were like those iced sugar cookies that you see in the store in those little plastic things that are all the same, and Rice Krispie treats, and I started eating, and I did not stop eating for days. And so, like, what we're like 2 weeks out, or are we 3 weeks out? I don't even know now where we from the competition,
A
but
little over 2 weeks. Yeah.
I'm
A little over 2 weeks.
I am 20 pounds above my stage weight right now, uh, which
That's a good week. That's a
hu-
good week.
humorously, I was like 20 pounds above my stage weight like 3 or 4 days after the competition. So it did not take long. I'm told by my coach that like half of that is like water weight and all the stuff that you
Yeah.
do to kind of, shrink your body down and evacuate the fat cells, and all of that. It all comes kind of rushing back. So half of it was that, and half of it I think is just food. So I think I've got a month or two of cutting back down to a what he wants to do is he wants me to be at a 4 week out
Oh,
place
so
in
you're
in
keeping
where
them.
Well,
Yeah.
I thought about it for a few weeks, whether or not to just keep using a coach to manage weight and food, which I really like not having to think about it, or to actually do it again. I think I'll probably work towards actually doing it again. I can obviously bail anytime that I want, but work towards doing it again, probably in another year, maybe not in the spring, but in the fall, and see what happens. If I'm not in better shape, to be on stage by that point than I was this first time, then I probably won't. I don't know if it's worth the hassle for that. It was funny though. Whenever you start putting back on weight, and I'm done. We both probably have to go, but the weight only like came back in around the spare tire, around the waist, and so it was like my entire body was still like 9% body fat, except this one little ring like right around my waist. Like all of the water and
Yeah.
all the weight came back, but it did not distribute itself over my entire body. It just all went to one place, and it was the weirdest looking thing ever. I'm like, I lost it, over the entire body, but whenever it came back, it did not come back. Now it's kind of distributed itself back out some, but in the beginning, it was just the whole process has been crazy, but it was fun. I'm glad I did it. I'm glad it's over, and I've been able to eat relatively normally for a few weeks. But it's time to get back on the wagon again. I've enjoyed.
Well, you
I've
probably
enjoyed,
had a.
I've enjoyed way too many of these. Yeah,
Yeah, those are pretty good. I must admit. You probably had like some bloat too, which probably contributed to the
absolutely.
waist
Yeah,
thing. Yeah, I was gonna go back to because I think it's an important point if people are still listening is the community aspect of fitness. I mean, it's across the board, not just there. Like that's why I love CrossFit, and even at this 5K, there was a lady. It was funny. I didn't realize she was behind me, but I guess she was behind me the whole time, and she like sprinted at the end to catch up with me, and she told me, "You're my motivation." Like I guess I would stop and walk and then run just before she would pass me, and she's like, "You just kept me going because you just kept going, kept going." I was like so impressed that you just kept going, and I knew you were tired and all of that, and I felt so encouraged by her. So she's like, "Can we finish together?" And I was like, "Yeah, let's finish together." So it was
that's
pretty cool,
awesome.
and yeah, just the vibe after the race. Similarly, like everybody's so encouraging and caring for each other, and I think I found that through the years, just doing different fitness stuff. That community is so strong, and yeah, I think we did an episode on it. Why can't the church take some of that? And we tend to not do that. So yeah, it's a good lesson I think for everybody. And so if you haven't experienced that, go out and do some fitnessy thing, some competition. It's a joy. It really is.
Yeah, it is. It's good. It's good
Yeah.
for the soul.
Cool, man. Congrats. I was so happy that you got a medal. When you told me that I don't think I'm gonna get a medal, I'm like, dude, stop. I was like, I don't forget what I said to you, but I'm happy you got one because
Yeah, I am too. And
well earned. Well earned.
now that I'm through it, now I get to have my Achilles surgery. So
Oh yeah. When is that?
that's tomorrow, actually.
Okay.
Yeah, tomorrow.
All right.
Releasing the calf muscle is actually what they do. They incise the calf muscle so it releases the tension on the Achilles, and then there's a bone spur being shaved down. So yeah, it's gonna be a fun. Yeah, no fun.
All right.
Gonna be a fun recovery. If we don't have a show for a few weeks, you'll know why.
So you'll be doing a lot of upper body. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not allowed in the gym at least for 2 weeks at all. So it's gonna be.
Okay.
Yeah, maybe I'll hit 30 pounds.
It's a perfect time of year. Perfect time of year for it.
Yeah, right. I mean, it's a perfect time of year to just let myself go.
Just throw on a sweatshirt. You're good.